Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise to bring you the most important nuggets of knowledge, all while keeping you hooked. Today we're doing an SPHR deep dive, specifically focusing on the critical core of human resource planning, recruitment, and selection. Think of this as your essential strategic overview or maybe a powerful recap for this vital section of the SPHR. Our mission, to really unpack how organizations truly build their future workforce, from anticipating skill gaps years out to bringing in the absolute right talent, all while, staying legally compliant and fiercely competitive. We're here to give you the surprising facts and actionable insights that make you genuinely well-informed.
That's absolutely right. And this area is so much more than just, filling seats. It's really about proactively shaping an organization's future, mitigating human capital risks before they even become real problems, and directly contributing to those big picture strategic business goals. We're going to peel back the layers today and illuminate the why behind these complex HR functions, showing how they truly sit at the heart of organizational success.
Okay, let's unpack this with maybe a real-world scenario. Imagine Innovate Corp, right? A fast-growing tech company. They're kind of struggling to predict their future staffing needs, especially for those super specialized roles. They're just hiring reactively when a gap appears. What exactly is strategic human resource planning, SHRP, and how is it fundamentally different from how Innovate Corp might be thinking about traditional HR management?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to frame it because the distinction is, it's crucial. Innovate Corp's reactive approach. That's classic, traditional human resource management, HRM. It's typically short-term, focused on day-to-day stuff like payroll, basic recruiting, handling immediate employee issues. Often feels like putting out fires, Strategic human resource management, SHRM, which includes SHRP, is fundamentally different. It's proactive. It's long-term. We're usually talking 1 to 5 years ahead. Its core purpose is to deeply weave HR practices into the overall business strategy and those long-term organizational goals. It treats your people, your human capital, as a strategic asset, a source of competitive advantage. It's all aimed directly at achieving organizational success by deploying a highly committed and capable workforce.
Okay, so for Innovate Corp, or really any organization wanting to level up,
Yeah.
what are the big pieces of this strategic HR planning process? What elevates it beyond just daily operations? What should they actually be focusing on?
Right. It's a whole framework. For Innovate Corp, it would kick off with robust workforce planning and forecasting. That's where they'd seriously examine their future capacity and, importantly, the skills they'll need down the road. Then there's succession planning. That's vital for spotting those high-risk positions and getting internal talent ready to step up, ensuring continuity. You don't want key roles sitting empty. Strategic HR also deeply integrates workforce diversity and inclusion, fostering an inclusive culture. And this isn't just a compliance thing, it's a strategic must-have for innovation. And of course, using HR metrics and analytics, making decisions based on data, not just gut feeling, plus integrating change management to handle shifts in the market or tech, and ensuring foundational compliance with labor laws. That last one is crucial for mitigating risks.
That brings us right to the why. You mentioned it's a strategic asset. Why is this proactive approach so incredibly crucial for long-term success? It sounds like it's pretty much non-negotiable for any company serious about scaling sustainably.
Oh, absolutely. Non-negotiable is a good word for it. Think about Innovate Corp again. If they shift to SHRP, they'd likely see a significant boost in organizational performance. Why? Because all their HR practices become synced up with their bigger business goals, like launching new products or breaking into new markets. It's key for attracting and keeping top talent, which, especially in tech, is their main competitive edge, right? Beyond that, SHRP helps organizations adapt way more effectively to rapid changes. Think new AI, economic shifts, emerging trends. And critically, it ensures business continuity. It makes sure they consistently have the right number of people with the right skills ready for whatever the future holds. It's kind of like organizational insurance.
So it's definitely not a one-and-done activity then. It's more like a continuous loop, always adjusting. I understand the process usually follows a 5-step model, which really highlights that iterative nature for our listeners.
Precisely. It's a cycle. It starts with analyzing current capacity, basically, understanding who you have and what skills they bring to the table. Then, forecasting future needs, predicting the talent you'll require down the line. Next comes a gap analysis. This is where you pinpoint the differences between what you have and what you actually need. From there, you develop action plans specifically designed to close those identified gaps. And finally, and this is key, there's continuous implementation and monitoring. That last bit really emphasizes that SHRP is iterative, it's dynamic, not just a linear check-the-box event. You're constantly reevaluating, recalibrating. And what's really fascinating is how SHRP is constantly influenced by this interplay of internal and external factors. Internally, you're looking at, your current employee skills, productivity levels, company culture, critical turnover rates. Externally, you have to be continuously scanning market trends, economic conditions, evolving labor laws, the intense competition for talent, especially in fields like tech, plus technological advancements, even the broader geopolitical environment. And SPHR has to proactively manage all this, constantly scanning and developing robust contingency plans for those human capital risks.
Okay, so once we have that strategic blueprint for our people, the next massive piece is actually finding them. But we're talking strategic recruitment, right? Not just slapping a job ad online.
Yeah.
What's the strategic imperative here for Innovate Corp beyond just, filling empty seats?
Right. Strategic recruitment goes way beyond just an operational task. For Innovate Corp, it's absolutely key to ensuring they have the right individuals with the appropriate, maybe cutting-edge skills in the correct roles, and crucially, precisely when they're needed. It directly fuels innovation, helps with market expansion, improves customer satisfaction, and ultimately drives revenue growth. You can almost think of it as a growth engine for the whole company. It means HR needs to translate those broad business KPIs into specific, measurable HR KPIs. Like, how does our time to hire impact the launch date for our next big product? That's strategic recruitment thinking.
And in today's market, which is super competitive, especially for that top tech talent Innovate Corp needs, how do they make themselves, irresistible? That's where employer branding fits in, I guess.
Absolutely. Employer branding is that strategic process of clearly explaining and communicating your organization's mission, its core values, and what makes your work environment distinct. Communicating that to potential hires. It's all about shaping how people perceive your company as a great place to work, its core components. Well, it has to start with an authentic company culture and values, and I mean authentic. It has to genuinely reflect what it's like to work there day to day. If it doesn't, you just get disillusionment and high turnover. HR really acts as culture champions here. Then there's the employee value proposition, the EVP. That's the unique mix of benefits, rewards, and opportunities you offer. Think compensation, sure, but also health benefits, development opportunities, flexible work arrangements, recognition programs. And this EVP needs to be dynamic, maybe even segmented for different talent profiles. What attracts that cutting-edge AI specialist might be very different from what attracts, say, a sales generalist. And finally, don't forget the candidate experience. Every single interaction, from the moment someone becomes aware of your company right through to onboarding, it all influences their perception. A positive, smooth experience. That's crucial for getting them to accept an offer, getting referrals later, and even for early retention. This often means using technology to automate some of the more admin-heavy tasks. Then you amplify this brand using digital platforms like social media, sharing authentic content, employee stories, maybe glimpses of the workplace, highlighting perks and training.
Okay, so Innovate Corp knows what talent they need from planning. They know how to look appealing through branding. Now, how do we actually find those people? What are the strategic choices when it comes to sourcing talent?
Right, now we get practical. You have to weigh the strategic pros and cons of different methods. Let's start with internal recruitment. This includes things like promotions, transfers, employee referrals tapping into your current network. And did you know that rehired boomerang employees, sometimes they can be significantly more productive in their first quarter back and cost way less to recruit than someone brand new? The advantages are pretty clear. It's usually more cost-effective, maybe even a 30% drop in hiring costs. It's faster to fill the role, it boosts internal morale and retention, there's less risk because you know their track record, and they obviously fit the culture. Plus, it directly feeds into your succession planning. But there are potential downsides. You might get resentment from employees who are overlooked. There's a risk of stagnation, maybe limited diversity of ideas if you only hire internally, and of course you create a new vacancy that needs filling.
Okay, so internal has its perks, but what about bringing in fresh perspectives, maybe that groundbreaking innovation Innovate Corp needs?
That's exactly where external recruitment comes in. It gives you access to a much wider talent pool. The methods here are varied. Online job boards, obviously your company careers page, social media ads, college recruiting, tapping into trade associations, using private staffing firms, public employment services, and don't forget leveraging contingent workers like freelancers or temps. The strategic upsides: a bigger pool to choose from, fresh ideas that can help avoid groupthink, access to highly specialized skills you might not have internally. It can really facilitate business growth and even give you competitive insights if you hire from competitors. But you have to be aware of the challenges too. It generally costs more ads, agency fees, maybe relocation. It often takes longer to hire, sometimes months for very specialized roles. There's increased risk because they're an unknown quantity. The onboarding burden is greater, and if it's not managed well, it could potentially dent internal morale. Regardless of the source, though, forecasting those recruitment needs involves both quantitative methods like trend analysis and qualitative ones like manager judgment, or maybe the Delphi technique for getting expert consensus anonymously. You really want to integrate both for solid forecasts.
Right. So let's say Innovate Core has used these methods. They've got a great pool of candidates. Now, the really critical step, selection. How do we make sure we're picking the absolute best person fairly and crucially legally?
Yeah, the selection process is essentially a funnel, narrowing down the pool. It usually starts with screening applications, often using an applicant tracking system, an ATS, to manage volume. That's typically followed by some kind of preliminary interview, maybe a phone screen. Then you might move to various assessments or tests. Next up are more in-depth, structured interviews. After that stage, potentially background checks and maybe medical exams, but remember, those have to come after a conditional job offer has been made. Then you make the formal offer. And finally, onboarding, which is so critical for getting that new hire integrated and productive quickly, impacting early retention.
Okay, two really important concepts always come up here, foundational for doing selection well: reliability and validity. Can you break down the difference, and why are they so absolutely critical for an SPHR trying to build a consistently high-performing team?
Oh, they're absolutely fundamental. Let's take reliability first. Reliability is all about the consistency of your selection measure. For instance, does a test give pretty much the same result if someone takes it again under similar conditions? Or do different interviewers using the same structured process give similar scores to the same candidate? If yes, it's reliable. Without reliability, a method just cannot be valid. It's impossible. Think about it. If two interviewers watch the same interview and come away with wildly different scores using the same guide, that interview process lacks reliability. Something's inconsistent. Validity, on the other hand, that's about accuracy. Does the selection method actually measure what it claims to measure? And most importantly, does it predict future job performance? So a valid cognitive ability test for, say, an engineer means that candidates who score higher on that test should, generally speaking, perform better once they're on the job. There's a useful mnemonic. Reliable can exist without being valid, but valid never exists without reliability. A scale could reliably tell you weigh 10 pounds every day, but that's not valid, right? It's a core SPHR principle.
That's a great way to put it. So what are the common tools we use in selection, and what are the big strategic and, maybe more importantly, legal watchouts for each? Because this feels like an area where organizations can easily get into hot water.
Exactly. This is where compliance becomes very real. Okay, first up, application forms, sometimes called application blanks. The goal is standardization, collecting consistent information from everyone. Now, a more sophisticated version is the weighted application blank, or WAB. These are fascinating. They assign different statistical weights to specific responses based on research showing how well those answers predict job success. This can really boost the validity of your initial screen. Legally, though, you absolutely must avoid illegal inquiries. Things like race, religion, marital status, age, although asking, "Are you over 18?" is okay for child labor law reasons. You shouldn't ask for social security numbers at the application stage, and you need to be careful about criminal history questions, especially where ban-the-box laws apply. These laws often prohibit asking about criminal records on the initial application. Okay, next, interviewing. Here, we really emphasize structured interviews. This means asking all candidates the same job-related questions using standardized rating scales. These consistently demonstrate higher reliability and validity compared to unstructured, chatty interviews. Again, illegal questions are a huge red flag. Don't Ask, are you married? Do you plan on having children? What church do you go to? And instead focus squarely on legal job-related questions. This role requires weekend work. Can you meet that requirement? Or are you able to perform the essential functions of this job with or without a reasonable accommodation? We also have to be aware of interviewer biases, things like the halo horn effect, where one really good or bad trait overshadows everything else, or similarity bias, where we subconsciously favor people who seem like us. How do you mitigate these? Structured formats help a lot. Using multiple interviewers, maybe a panel, and providing unconscious bias training focused on objective evaluation. Then there's pre-employment testing and assessment, lots of types here. Achievement tests check existing knowledge. Aptitude or ability tests look at cognitive skills, mechanical aptitude, things like that. Motor or physical ability tests are sometimes needed, but they must relate to essential job functions and fully comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. You might also use personality and interest inventories, like the Big Five model. Legally, any medical component, and that includes psychological tests that could be considered medical, has to wait until after a conditional job offer is made. And then, if you test, you have to test all entering employees in that same job category equally. Oh, and polygraph tests, generally banned for most private employers. Background investigations are about verifying the information candidates provide. This can include checking employment references, doing criminal history checks, but remember, these should be post-offer, demonstrably relevant to the job, and comply with any applicable ban-the-box laws. Credit checks might be used for certain roles, like finance, but they must be job-related and require the candidate's explicit consent. Verifying education, credentials, professional licenses, that's standard practice too. Social media checks are tricky. Be very cautious as they can easily reveal information about protected characteristics. And critically, if you use a third-party vendor for checks, you must comply with the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA. That involves getting consent and following specific steps if you plan to take adverse action based on the report. Failing to do proper checks, especially for roles with public safety implications, can lead to lawsuits for negligent hiring if something goes wrong later. That can be incredibly costly. Finally, medical examinations and drug testing. The rule is clear. Only allowed after a conditional job offer has been made. They must be job-related, and the requirement must be applied consistently to all individuals entering that specific job role. And, of course, the results must be kept confidential, separate from the main personnel file.
Okay, so we've got all these tools and processes, but how do we actually know if our selection system is truly working? Is it fair? Is it effective? What are the key indicators an SPHR needs to monitor to make sure they're consistently picking the best matches without creating legal headaches?
That's where evaluation comes in. First, you should conduct validation studies periodically. These studies confirm whether your selection tools, your tests, your interview ratings actually predict on-the-job success. This often requires decent sample sizes to be statistically meaningful. But crucially, you need to perform adverse impact analysis. This means regularly analyzing your hiring data, looking at selection rates across different demographic groups protected by law. And this is where the 4/5 rule, or the 80% rule, comes into play. It's a guideline used by enforcement agencies. Basically, if the selection rate for any protected group, say, based on race or gender, is less than 80% or 4/5 of the selection rate for the group with the highest rate, it's a red flag. It suggests potential adverse impact, signaling that you need to investigate your process and be prepared to justify it, usually by proving the selection practice is job-related and consistent with business necessity through validation. For example, if you hire 40% of your male applicants but only 20% of your female applicants for a role, the ratio is 20 divided by 40, which is 0.5 or 50%. That's way below the 80% threshold. Now, it's important to stress, failing the 80% rule is not automatically illegal. It's an indicator that triggers closer scrutiny. Other evaluation methods include tracking the performance of new hires over time, looking at selection yield metrics like how many applicants make it through each stage of the funnel, and absolutely critical, maintaining thorough audit trails and documentation. That's your defense if your practices are ever challenged.
We've definitely touched on legality quite a bit, but let's maybe zoom in on the core laws that really form the foundation here. For an SPHR, understanding these isn't just about ticking boxes. It's about deeply grasping the risks and the strategic implications, right?
Absolutely. Knowing the legal landscape is non-negotiable at the SPHR level. The backbone of all this in the U.S. is built on several key federal laws. At their core are the Equal Employment Opportunity, or EEO, laws. Their purpose is to protect individuals against discrimination in employment. The foundational one is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and importantly, the interpretation of sex now clearly includes pregnancies, sexual orientation, and gender identity and national origin. Title VII generally applies to employers with 15 or more employees. Then you have the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the ADEA from 1967. This protects individuals who are 40 years of age or older from discrimination. It applies to employers with 20 or more employees. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA from 1990, and its amendment, the ADAA from 2008, prohibit discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities. They also mandate reasonable accommodations unless doing so would cause undue hardship for the employer. Like Title VII, the ADA generally covers employers with 15 or more employees. And a very significant recent addition is the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, PWFA, from 2023. This requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations related to pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions, even if those conditions don't meet the definition of a disability under the ADA. Again, that's for employers with 15 or more employees. There's also the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, GINA, from 2008, which prohibits using genetic information like family medical history in employment decisions. Also 15-plus employees. The Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, USERA, from 1994, protects military service members and veterans from discrimination based on their service and guarantees their reemployment rights after service. This one is broader. It applies to all employers, regardless of size. No minimum employee count. And finally, the Immigration Reform and Control Act, IRCA, of 1986. This has two sides. It prohibits knowingly employing unauthorized workers, hence the I-9 verification requirement for everyone hired, but it also prohibits discrimination based on citizenship status or national origin. The anti-discrimination part applies to employers with 4 or more employees.
Wow, okay, that is definitely a lot of ground to cover. And I know from experience there are some crucial distinctions within these laws that even experienced HR pros can sometimes mix up, which can lead to pretty significant problems. Can you maybe clarify some of those really common points of confusion?
Yes, absolutely. These distinctions are critical for SPHR level understanding and often appear in tricky scenarios. First, let's nail down disparate treatment versus disparate impact. Disparate treatment is intentional discrimination. It's when an employer treats an applicant or employee differently because of their protected characteristic. The classic example is a manager saying, "I'm not hiring women for this construction job." The intent is clear. Disparate impact, often called adverse impact, is usually unintentional. It happens when a seemingly neutral company policy or selection practice ends up disproportionately excluding people from a protected group, and crucially, that practice is not proven to be job-related and consistent with business necessity. That 4/5 rule, the 80% rule we talked about, that's the common yardstick used as a red flag for potential disparate impact. Okay, second distinction, the bona fide occupational qualification, or BFOQ. This is a very, very narrow exception to anti-discrimination rules. It allows employers to make hiring decisions based on a protected characteristic, like age, sex, religion, or national origin, only if that characteristic is genuinely necessary for the normal operation of that particular business or role. Think maybe hiring an actor of a specific age to play an age-specific character, or requiring a female attendant in a women's locker room for privacy reasons. Those might qualify as BFOQs. But here's the absolute key takeaway. Race can never be a BFOQ. Ever. There are no exceptions for race. And third, let's clarify affirmative action versus diversity and inclusion. They are related, but distinct. Affirmative action refers to specific proactive steps taken by employers, often federal contractors, under Executive Order 11246, or sometimes due to court orders to recruit, hire, and promote qualified individuals from groups that have been historically underrepresented in certain jobs. It involves setting goals and measuring progress, but importantly, it does not involve setting rigid quotas. Quotas, which mandate hiring specific numbers based on race or gender, are generally illegal. And it's worth noting there have been recent legal developments affecting the scope of race and gender-based affirmative action programs for federal contractors, though non-discrimination laws and requirements for veterans and individuals with disabilities remain firmly in place under separate regulations. Diversity and inclusion, D&I, on the other hand, is a much broader strategic initiative. It's focused on creating a workforce with a variety of perspectives and backgrounds and fostering an inclusive environment where everyone feels valued and can contribute fully. The goal here is often tied to business value driving innovation, better understanding diverse markets, improving decision-making, rather than specific legal compliance mandates, though it certainly supports EEO goals.
That makes sense. It's complex enough just within the U.S., but what happens when a company like Innovate Corp goes global? They can't just apply U.S. laws everywhere, can they?
Oh, absolutely not. That would be a huge mistake. Global HR compliance means navigating a really complex web of varying employment laws from country to country. For instance, think about mandatory benefits. In Germany, employers are typically required to contribute significantly to health insurance and pension plans. In the US, there's generally no federal mandate for employers to provide health insurance, and things like paid time off vary widely by state and company policy. Or look at parental leave. Sweden offers something like 480 days of paid parental leave, which parents can share. In the US, the federal FMLA provides 12 weeks of unpaid job-protected leave for eligible employees. Massive difference. You see similar huge variations in minimum wage laws, rules around terminating employees, how workers are classified, employer versus contractor, and increasingly important data privacy regulations like the EU's GDPR or China's PIPL. So the strategic approach has to be think globally, act locally. What does that mean in practice? Develop a core global anti-discrimination policy that reflects your company's values, often aligning with the strictest requirements where you operate, but build in flexibility to adapt practices locally to comply with specific country laws and cultural norms. It's also important to remember that U.S. employment laws generally do not apply to non-U.S. citizens working outside the United States, even if they work for a U.S.-based company. The exception is usually for U.S. citizens working abroad for American employers. Furthermore, ethical recruitment practices become even more critical globally. Frameworks like the IRIS standard emphasize principles like fair and transparent hiring, prohibiting charging recruitment fees to job seekers, ensuring workers have freedom of movement, and providing clear transparency about job terms and conditions. Ultimately, proactive compliance isn't just about avoiding fines or lawsuits, it's a strategic imperative. It means truly embedding EEO principles into every single aspect of your workforce planning, your job descriptions, your interview processes. It involves training managers not just on the law, but on how to recognize and mitigate their own unconscious biases to assess talent objectively. And it requires regularly analyzing your HR data, like doing that adverse impact analysis we discussed, to proactively spot potential issues before they blow up. It's really about fostering that diverse and inclusive workforce as a genuine strategic asset, something that drives innovation and strengthens your employer brand globally.
Okay, so we've done all this planning, recruiting, selecting, and ensuring compliance. How do we actually measure if these efforts are, paying off? Are they providing real business value for companies like Innovate Corp? And what's the SPHR's ultimate role in connecting all these dots strategically?
Great question. Measuring effectiveness is key. The single most critical metric, the one that truly gets at business value, is quality of hire, or QOH. QOH tries to capture the overall impact and value new employees bring. It often looks at a combination of factors like their on-the-job performance ratings, how long they stay with the company, retention rate, how quickly they get up to speed, ramp-up time, maybe hiring manager satisfaction, even cultural fit assessments. It's focused on the effectiveness of the hire, not just the efficiency of the process. Of course, we also track efficiency metrics. Things like time to fill and time to hire measure speed. Cost per hire, or CPH, measures financial efficiency, basically, total recruitment cost divided by total hires. Other important metrics include the offer acceptance rate, which tells you how competitive your offers are, and yield ratios, which track how efficiently candidates move through each stage of your recruitment funnel, say, from applicant to screened or screened to interviewed. You also want to track diversity metrics at each stage to ensure inclusive outcomes. But here's the strategic imperative for an SPHR. You have to balance efficiency with effectiveness. For example, if you push too hard to lower your cost per hire, you might end up sacrificing quality of hire. You might hire faster and cheaper. But if those hires perform poorly or leave quickly, your overall workforce costs actually go up due to turnover, lost productivity, and needing to hire again. Strategic HR understands this trade-off and prioritizes making the right hire, the one that delivers long-term value, not just the fastest or cheapest hire.
That makes perfect sense. So this really isn't just about following HR rules. It's about leading the organization's whole human capital strategy. What does the SPHR bring to the table that truly differentiates the role from, say, a more operational HR manager?
An SPHR embodies strategic leadership, first and foremost. They're not just implementing policies, they're developing comprehensive HR strategies that are tightly linked to the overall organizational strategy. They're constantly monitoring the horizon, identifying and mitigating human capital risks, things like potential skill gaps, rising turnover in critical roles, or the loss of institutional knowledge when key people leave. They need strong business acumen. That means understanding financial statements, interpreting key business metrics and KPIs, and using that understanding to assess HR's impact and drive strategic goals. They have to speak the language of business leaders. This role increasingly relies on data analysis and even predictive analytics, using HR metrics and business intelligence tools not just to report on the past, but for foresight anticipating future workforce needs, identifying potential challenges before they become major problems. Ultimately, the SPHR is instrumental in driving organizational performance and managing change. They ensure HR practices directly support the company's big objectives, maybe lead initiatives around HR technology and digitalization, and design and facilitate effective change management strategies across the organization. And SPHR fundamentally elevates the conversation. It moves beyond "don't discriminate or we might get sued" to embracing EEO, diversity, and strategic workforce planning is absolutely critical for our long-term innovation, market competitiveness, and overall organizational success.
Fantastic. So finally, let's talk about those common pitfalls. What are some of those misunderstandings or traps that even experienced HR professionals can fall into, especially we're looking through that SPHR strategic lens? What are the things you see tripping people up again and again in the real world?
Yeah, there are definitely some recurring themes. First, as we discussed, confusing reliability versus validity is a big one. Remember, a selection tool can be perfectly consistent, reliable, but still not actually predict job performance. Invalid. You need both. Second, underestimating proactive culture management. Thinking culture just happens or that stating values on a poster is enough. Culture has to be actively shaped and authentically aligned with those values, or your branding efforts will fail. Third, acknowledging that forecasting is imperfect. Plans need to be built with flexibility and adaptability in mind because unforeseen events, economic downturns, new technologies, pandemics will happen. Rigid plans break. Fourth, a really common one is neglecting long-term strategic goals by getting completely buried in the day-to-day operational tasks. Strategic HR requires carving out time to think and plan ahead. Fifth, overlooking diversity and inclusion during the planning phase. Treating D&I as just a recruitment or compliance issue is a strategic misstep. It needs to be woven into workforce planning, succession planning, everything. Failing to do so means you're likely missing out on valuable talent pools, innovation, and market insights. Also, a few specific legal points get muddled. Remember, the 80% rule, forfeits rule, is not an absolute law itself. It's a guideline, a red flag that triggers investigation, not automatic proof of illegal discrimination. BFOQ misuse is another. People try to stretch it way too far. It's an extremely limited exception and crucially never applies to race. The distinction between affirmative action and quotas is vital. Affirmative action involves goals and good faith efforts. Rigid quotas are generally illegal. A big one for global companies is ignoring the global dimension, forgetting that U.S. laws generally don't follow U.S. companies abroad for their non-U.S. citizen employees. And the timing under the ADA for medical and disability-related inquiries is absolutely prohibited before a conditional job offer is made. That timing is critical. Lastly, and this is huge, underestimating the risk of retaliation. Often the retaliation claim, punishing someone for complaining about discrimination or participating in an investigation, is easier to prove than the original discrimination claim itself. It's a standalone violation under all major EEO laws and a very dangerous trap to fall into.
Wow. This has been an absolutely incredible SPHR deep dive into human resource planning, recruitment, and selection. We've really covered the whole journey, haven't we? From meticulously planning those future human capital needs to strategically attracting and then selecting the right talent, all underpinned by that deep understanding of legal and ethical compliance. It's so clear how adopting the SPHR mindset truly transforms HR from a support function into a proactive, value-adding strategic partner that genuinely drives an organization forward.
Indeed. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. As you think about your own organization, consider this. How truly integrating diversity and inclusion into your entire HR planning, recruitment, and selection lifecycle isn't just about ticking boxes or avoiding legal trouble, but it's actually about unlocking entirely new levels of innovation, gaining deeper market insight, and building a significant competitive advantage. Ask yourself, what incredible talent are you missing right now simply because your current processes aren't intentionally designed to find them?
That's a really powerful thought to end on, perfectly emphasizing the strategic impact of getting this right. Thank you so much for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.